Hey again, friends. It is Russell Harris with Live 38 Real Estate in sunny Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, coming to you with your July market update. Guys, this is going to be a really special episode. I've put a lot of time looking into a lot of data on this one. We're halfway through the year. We're getting into Q3. We're almost we're almost to August at this point, which just blows my mind how fast this year is going by. But the story this year continues to be consistency, a consistent build, a consistent shift, and there's a lot of data to look at. So this one's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a long one. Please stay tuned till the end. We're going to be covering a lot of information in this one. Before we start, if you enjoy these, if they're helpful to you, please do me a favor, like it, subscribe it, leave me a comment down below. Before we get into it, I want to show you guys this. Check this out. If you're on 30A and you ever see a little Volkswagen bus that looks like that, that's the bus for our brokerage. So please stop by, come take a picture, say hi. We'll all be thrilled to see you. We usually use it to go do some property tours and stuff like that from time to time. But if you want one of these stickers, let me know. Comment down below that you want a sticker, and I will reach out and send one to you. My pleasure. But without further ado, let's start getting into the data. So I'm going to throw the graphic up here on the screen. You're looking at the same thing I am. We're going to go line by line on this. So again, it's going to be a long one. We're going to cover the month to month, then we're going to kind of look at the year so far, and then we're going to look back 3.5 years. So a lot of information to go over. So first and foremost, looking at active listings, month over month, they've stayed consistent, pretty flatlined. That's a little bit of a change from what we've seen over the last year so far with the steady decline in active inventory. But we can see that with the year over year down 24% in active inventory. So a quarter less than we were this time a year ago. And then year to date down almost 9% versus year to date last year. Moving on to new listings, we've got a little bit less this month coming new to the market, down 16.8%, year over year down 12.6%, and then year to date down almost 12%. Pended listings, yet again, this has been like the story of the year. Pended listings continue to be up. So month over month up to almost 3%, year over year up almost 33%. That is crazy. And then year to date up almost 41%. Is astonishing how many pended listings. The ratio of pended listings to sold listings continues to stay super tight. And when we look at the graph here in a second, you'll see how it's just been a steady trend away from how saturated the market was last year. Speaking of which, moving on, sold listings have been pretty stable from last month, but up year over year, up 54.3%, excuse me, and year to date up almost 46%. It's incredible, like the amount of shift that has happened from last year to this year. And again, looking even further past that, which we'll do that a little bit later, just how much has changed. The absorption rate is down to 9.57 months, which is the lowest point. It's the lowest point it's been at. Month over month down a little bit 4%, year over year down 43.3%, and year to date down almost 30% as well. Average days on market continues to trend downward, down 10.8% from last month, year over year down 5%, and then year to date down 7.7%. Our median days on market, and I talk about this a lot, but the median and average in our market is really a tough metric to go on, average especially, just because there's such a wide variety in our market. And I'm actually going to pause there because it's something that's really important to take into account. It's actually something that even after almost 6 years of doing this, it gives me anxiety when people ask me, how's the 30A real estate market? Because the answer can be so nuanced depending on which section of the 30A corridor you're referring to. You know, despite it just being a short little span of the Emerald Coast, there's so much variety in the housing availabilities, the opportunities for investment. I mean, I said this in the last video and I've said it before, but we've got properties ranging from $350,000 at the entry level all the way up to $35+ million. And the way that the towns are spread out, you know, if you've never been to 30A, they're all unique. They're all built differently. They all have different design codes. They all have got different amenities, different retail, commercial spaces, and the accesses are all different. So there's just so much variety to influence all these different figures. So, you know, I do these market updates, and I need you to know it is the broad view of all of 30A, but you could dissect that, you know, down to 30A West and 30A East. You could divide that even further still into Dune Allen, Blue Mountain, Gulf Place, Grayton Beach, Seaside, Watercolor, Seagrove, Seacrest Beach. You know, there's a difference there, and so on and so forth. Alice Beach, Rosemary, Inlet. And each one of them has its own little micro market unto itself. So it's important to keep that in mind, but I say that because when we look at things like median days on market and average days on market and average sale price, median sale price, from this vantage point, it's taking into all of those things into account. But it's important to look at that because it shows the trajectory of the market at large. And that's what I like to focus on this channel. But if you're watching this and you're specifically interested in a certain area, a certain neighborhood, certain community, please reach out. I'm more than happy to send you, more nuanced, granular data so you can get a really good, clear grasp on the areas that you're interested in and see how the market's behaving there. But getting back to the data, sorry, I digress. It's really exciting stuff. But median days on market, 71 days. Year over year, that's down 12.4%. Year to date, that's down almost 23%, down 23%. Our sold to list ratio is up barely, 94.7%, but that's really good. That means there's still room for negotiation. Buyers still have time and advantages in this market. Like I said, 9.57 months of inventory in our absorption rate. That's still definitely considered a buyer's market. Average sale price is month over month, it's down 6.5%, but year over year up 24.5%, and year to date up 9.7%. It's currently at 2.485,560. But again, that's so heavily influenced by how much of our ultra luxury market is moving at a given time. So, we get a couple of 14, 15, 20, $25 million properties that's going to heavily influence that. Looking at it every month. Median sale price is a little bit safer metric to go on when it comes to that. And month over month, that is up 11.6%, up to 1.785 million. Year over year, up 28.4%, and year to date, up 10%. So market is definitely looking good. So let's get that off the screen, and we're going to take all of that into consideration and look at how the year has performed. This one has got a lot of information on it. This is where all this data comes from, but this is just looking at it from the last calendar year. The biggest thing I want to pay attention to on this for you guys is two things. One, the number of listings. I want you to see how there's never been any sudden drop. There's never been this drastic change, but there has just been this consistent whittling away at the amount of inventory that we have available. Meanwhile, our pending and sold contracts, and it's tough to see on this graphic, but the pending and sold contracts, as you've seen in these videos and as you've seen in my emails, it is consistently outpaced. We've had several months, most of the months this year, where pended contracts have outpaced sold contracts. And like I mentioned earlier, that ratio that we're seeing consistently of pended to sold is just super, super great. But the second thing, and probably the most dramatic thing you'll notice on this graph, is the absorption rate, which has just consistently fallen. A year ago from now, it was at 16 and a half months inventory, and we've lost 7 months of inventory since then. So we've almost halved it. We've almost halved it. So the market has definitely been moving. There has been no dramatic spikes, no dramatic drops in anything, but just this consistency. That has been the name of the game this year. But the last thing I want to bring up, and this is probably the most comprehensive thing I've done in a little while, but it felt necessary. We're halfway, like I said, we're halfway through the year. We're now into Q3. Still got half the year to go. But I wanted to know, this year has been so incredible with the amount of change that's happened, and it's incredible to me because I see it on a daily basis. So if you're watching this and you're not here in our local market, you're watching this from, say Atlanta or Tennessee or whatever, New Orleans, Dallas, you could be seeing headlines when it comes to the real estate market that spell a completely different story than what I'm talking about here. And this is something that we talk about consistently in our office, that national headlines and most major headlines, the type of the reporting that they're doing is not as nuanced as what we're doing here. We're boots on the ground. We're not focused on that stuff. We're just looking at the data that's in front of us. This is our real life experience. It's what we're seeing. It's really not me telling you as so much as it's the data telling you, and I'm just the messenger. But I wanted to look back and I wanted to see what the behavior of the market has been for the last 3.5 years. So I'm going to try to go by this as delicately as I can because there's a lot to look at here. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've looked at 6 metrics: the total sold volume, the average sale price, the median sale price, the number of sold listings, the number of pended listings, and the amount of homes that have sold for over $3 million. And I wanted to see how all of those have performed since January of 2023. So the first thing I'm going to pull up is total sold volume. And what I've done is I've put these red lines here, and these are denoting January of each year. So that line all the way to the far right that you see is January 2026, 2025, 2024, and then all the way to the far left at the start of the graph is 2020, January of 2023. And you can see total sold volume, and all of these have a trend line on them. You'll see that trend line running up right there. Each and every single one of these trend lines is up and to the right. And specifically, if you look at this year alone, just this year alone, the amount of volume that has closed in our market compared to certainly last year, there was a spike around April, May of 2024, and you'll see that across all the data points that we look at right now. And then prior to that in 2023 was probably the best market we've had in the last 3 years, but we are on track to beat that by a lot. And you can see that by looking at the sold volume. If you look at March onward, each and every one of those points is higher than any point within 2023. So that kind of speaks unto itself. But that has a lot to do with the emergence of the luxury market, but it also has a lot to do with the amount of activity that we've been seeing in the majority of our investor market, which is the like 1 million to maybe like 3 million range. The last thing I want to point out on this graph with the total sold volume is that this year is the first time since May of 2024 that we exceeded $300 million in sales in the last 3.5 years. But we've done it 3 times this year. We've only done it once in the last 3.5 years, and it was in May of 2024. This year, we have done it 3 times already. Something to think about. All right, moving on to average sale price. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this one just because of what I mentioned before. Average sale price is so heavily influenced by our ultra luxury market that it's a really tough metric to gauge. I really wanted to plug it in just to see what the trend line was, and like I mentioned before, it's up and to the right. I do want to just kind of point out, though, it's a good example. The trend line is really helpful, obviously, to see how things have appreciated or depreciated for that matter. I wanted to know either way. But more importantly was adding those vertical lines to denote the years, just because you have to be careful when you're looking at a lot of these metrics if you don't have the context surrounding them. The context is so important. But if you look, just pick any one of these years, 2023 through now, and you can see how they fluctuate so radically within a year's time, if not less. So, I say that because a lot of people decide to purchase on 30A, not necessarily impulsively, but it's usually driven by an impulse because this is a want market. Nobody needs to buy on 30A. They do it because they choose to do so. That's typically the case, whether that's to live here full time or whether that's to invest or both. This is usually a voluntary purchase. There's no one really coming here because their job's demanding them to. And because of that, a lot of times people will start looking at homes before they really talk to an agent, which is normal nowadays. A lot of people are looking at houses online before they ever even speak to one of us, but they're not getting the context surrounding what they're looking at. They may, they're just punching in a price range, they're punching in 30A or a general area. They're usually not too super specific. Maybe they're familiar with the area, but even if you're familiar with the area, you're not familiar with how the market is performing at any given time. So when they start looking into properties and maybe they start looking at some of the metrics that are included on Zillow and Homes or whatever your taster's choice is to look at homes, they're seeing metrics that don't have the context around them. So it's important to note just looking at this graph that those fluctuations are so heavily influenced by location, age of the home, proximity to the beach, and the list goes on and on and on. So all that to say and encourage you that if you are interested in purchasing in the 30A market, whether it's in the next month or in the next 5 years, start talking to an agent now. Reach out to me, reach out to whoever your trusted real estate agent is, and just start having those conversations so you can start getting clarity so that you can make confident decisions in what you decide to do. Okay, because there's just so many factors that go into it. Okay, before we move on, last thing I want to point out with the average sale prices is that this year is the first time in the last 3.5 years that the average sale price has been at or exceeded $2.45 million. So just within this year, it's carried that through. All right, moving on to median sale price. This year, this is the faintest of the changes, right? If you look at this trend line, it's very, very nominal, which is not surprising, right? We're looking at the median, so we're really taking into account the majority of the market, which is between like $1 and $3 million. But regardless, it is still up and to the right. It is still appreciated over the last 3.5 years. But the biggest thing I want to point out on this one is that if you notice, this year is the only year within the last 3.5 years that the median sale price has been at or above that trend line that you see. All right, moving on to sold listings. This one's pretty blatant, and the pended sales, which we'll look at next, are pretty blatant as well, but you can see on the far right there how it has just jumped and sat there. Two things I want to point out on the sold listings. We have been at or above 110 properties sold 4 of the last 6 months this year, and that is the highest point in the last 3.5 years. And there have been over 130 homes sold in March of this year, which is also the highest point in 3.5 years. You can see that there on that spike. Moving on to pended listings, same sort of deal, not too surprisingly, right? We usually see, if you see high pended listings in January, you'll probably see high sold listings in February. So you can see it's a slightly different curve there, but no less than 96 homes have been under contract every single month this year. We have not gone a single month this year without having any less than 96 properties under contract. And all of them, all of those data points that you're looking at right now have been above the trend line. And that is clearly the first time in 3.5 years we've seen that. So every single month, the number of pended listings has been above that trend line. All right, the last thing I want to show you guys, and this is probably one of the more exciting things for me, and as I'm looking at it, I'm kind of wishing that I've dug just a little bit deeper, and I probably will still do that after I finish recording this. But the number of homes that have sold $3 million or more over the last 3.5 years. But you can see that big spike in every single one of these graphs. You've probably noticed the big spike in May of 2024, which had that big surge in the market then. But if you look at that trend line, every month other than that has pretty much been below that. And you can see how it's kind of staggered above and below. But within the last 3.5 years, this has been the only year where every single month there have been more homes sold $3 billion or more than what you see on that trend line. So every single month has been above that trend line. So what does all of this mean? I would say it is irrefutable evidence that the 30A market continues to get stronger and it continues to become more and more nuanced. Something we haven't talked about in a while, the private beach situation. To be honest, I haven't gone out to some of the smaller accesses recently to kind of explore what that crowding is like. If you've been here this year, if you've kind of stayed in some of those tucked up areas, certainly around the Seagrove area, comment down below. Let me know. What was your experience like? How was your experience? What was the congestion like? Were you able to get down there? Parking can be traumatic for some people. Traffic can be difficult on 30A sometimes. It's not always rainbows and sunshine out here. We certainly have some struggles, certainly with the amount of expansion we've had over the last few years. So if you've been here recently, please let me know what your experience has been. But it's very encouraging for me as a realtor to look at this data and to see how the market is strengthening. It's just been this consistent strengthening. It's not been a surge. And I feel like a lot of people were maybe looking for that. Maybe people, I feel like a lot of people look for these dramatic shifts in our market, like these quick windows to be able to get in, maybe like, hey, is this the good time, are the market down? But all the evidence points to the market just getting stronger. So my message to everyone continues to be the same. If you're a buyer, you're quietly but steadily losing ground. As that absorption rate continues to drift closer to 6 months, especially that 4 to 6 months range is considered a balanced market. That's where it's theoretically an equal playing ground, right? You don't have as much leverage as you still do right now. But just remember, homes listed under $2 million make up 54% of our market. So there's a ton of opportunity. Don't be intimidated by some of this data, certainly not the 3 million ultra luxury market. There is still the vast majority of our market is sub $2 million. So there's still a ton of opportunity for you if you're a buyer. But like I said, as each month goes by, you're just going to lose a little bit more ground if things continue at the rate that they're going. If you're a seller, if you own here, you should be pumped because we're getting closer and closer to that balanced market and buyers are ready. We're seeing it. The amount, that ratio, pending contracts to sold contracts, I mean, it has just been consistent, nonstop, every single month after month, despite rising median sale prices, despite that absorption rate falling down, there are still buyers showing up and they are scooping up homes that are priced well and have the kind of amenities or they have the kind of appeal, they're turnkey, they're show ready. Those are the homes that are getting scooped up. So, you know, if that's the kind of position you're in, if you're ready to move on something, the buyers are there. And we can definitely have a conversation if you're interested in that to see what that can look like. That being said, if you're a seller and you want to test the market and you want to try to get top dollar, I'd advise against it. Not to say that you couldn't do it. I will say that I'll give you a caveat on this. If you wanted to list a property and try to get the top dollar that you possibly could, which I understand, right? My advice on that would be to expect to do a price adjustment within the first week if you do not see activity. That's my free little tip for you if you're a seller. If you're wanting to test the market, go ahead and price it above what, you know, your trusted real estate advisor advises you to do, but do not wait more than a week to make an adjustment. And that's, you know, I think sometimes sellers hear that and they hear price adjustment and they kind of clench up because they make it, to them it makes it feel like they're desperate to get rid of their property or something. But really what it signals to buyers is that you're serious about selling and that you're taking the process seriously, because what's really going to penalize you is if you test the market and you test it for like 2 weeks or more at a time. So that's my little piece of free advice there. But all in all, here's the thing. Sales are up, sale prices are up, sold volume is up. Every single trend line to enforce that the market is strengthening is up and to the right. So that's the story of this year. That has been, you know, in looking at the last 3.5 years, I'm more convinced than ever that this is like, I've been calling this the comeback year. 2026 is the comeback year. So if you have any questions about the data that I went over today, please reach out. Let me know. My contact information is down below. I send all of this out in an email newsletter, so if you'd like to sign up for that, I've got a link down below for that as well. You can also comment below if you'd like. I can send this information to you. We'll get connected that way. But either way, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for hanging in there. Some really exciting stuff happening in the 30A market right now. So if you got any questions, even if you're just curious, reach out. I'm happy to help. And I hope you and your family are having a beautiful summer. God bless you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.